Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, for those watching live, if you can give me a thumbs up to let me know, everything is working, I would greatly appreciate it. I've got Bill and Grady on the show. So we actually got, it's not a one-on-one interview. There's three of us today. And I'll let Bill and Grady introduce themselves. Well, I'll just do it now. Bill, you want to start off and just tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong personal finance nerd, like most of the folks in the audience, I'm sure. I go way back to the Quicken days of MS-DOS and all that good stuff. And I had a finance background. I also have a tech background. So my corporate career was with IBM, retired early, and I was looking for something else to do because I retired quite early. And so I opened up a financial counseling firm called Money Coach Group and was helping people just keep their heads above water, get their heads above water with cash flow, budgeting, that sort of thing. And something that occurred at that time was that the folks were coming back. I'd get them on solid ground and I'd say, go get yourself a financial plan, right? You really need to have a financial plan now that you're kind of positive cash flow, your head's above water. And they always came back and said, we can't really find one. The only people that will give us one want to manage our assets or sell us insurance or something like that. And you told us to beware of those things. And so we're just, we're stuck. And so then I decided to open Emancipare, which is essentially a financial planning firm. We don't manage any assets. We're advice only, and been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now. And I started to get a little overwhelmed as I'm semi-retired and not looking to work 80 hours a week like I did in my corporate career. And so about a year ago, this bright young man named Grady over here came onto my radar with similar goals. We both come from a financial counseling background. So with Emancipare, our goal is let's teach folks how to use tools that are available to consumers instead of try to tie those strings to them by using eMoney, Money Guide Pro, or Right Capital, so that anytime on the weekend they're having a glass of wine and dreaming about maybe buying a sailboat or retiring early or something, they don't have to wait till Monday, call their planner, get on the dance card, pay another $1,000. And so here we are. Grady and I have been doing this for folks for a while now, using Pralana online, or formerly Pralana Excel. And it's a nice little niche of DIY boglehead people who just don't want any strings attached, but want to be taught how to do this.
Okay, and we'll talk more about Pralana. So Grady, tell folks, a little bit about your background, and then I want to dive in about your firm and its advice-only kind of approach.
Okay, yeah. So my background is I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and my background is I've had a very rewarding career in the oil and gas industry. And early part of last year, I was in a position where I could retire early and go into my passion, because my passion has always been personal finance. I've been a financial nerd, like Bill says. And in my last couple of years of work, I took some courses to get my certificate in financial planning. So I was doing that part time because that's about all I could do with my job. And after I retired last year, I was very fortunate to come across Bill and this opportunity, and I've been working with Bill for the last year. I also have a passion in financial counseling as well, and I'm working on my AFC certification right now. I just have a couple of hours, and I will have that too, because I like to help people, especially do-it-yourself folks who can take the plan and kind of run with it themselves. But also, I want to help people who are trying to build their wealth to where they can get to a point where financial planners will want to work with them. And so that's the area that I'm focusing on.
You said AFC. What is that?
Accredited Financial Counselors.
Okay. And you got your firm, or the firm, is advice only. So you don't manage someone's investments, right?
That's correct.
And is the firm a registered investment advisor? Can you give folks advice on how they should invest and then let them go do it themselves? Is that sort of how it can work?
Yeah, that's a key thing. When I had Money Coach Group, I sold it because I was worried about all the compliance stuff. I knew that to do financial planning, I would have to be registered. And so I started Emancipare and registered with the state of Pennsylvania, which is where I live. I'm registered for several other states. You have to be registered anytime you get more than 5 clients. Typically, there's a couple exceptions to that. Grady's down in Texas, so he's registered down there and so forth. So yes, we are an RIA.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and this was something I thought about. I've decided not to do any of the kinds of things you're doing, but if someone came to me and said, Rob, would you look at I'll pay you whatever, a fee. Would you look at my portfolio and give me your opinion as to whether this is the right way to invest? And by the way, I've literally received hundreds of emails over the years, people asking me that. The answer is I can't legally do that. I'm not part of a registered investment. I did take the Series 65 exam and pass it, but I'm not a registered investment advisor. I'm not allowed to, I would get in trouble. I could do it for free. I can give my opinion all day long about someone's portfolio, but I can't charge for it. But if they came to me and said, well, what do you think about my retirement plan or Roth conversions? When should I start Social Security? What kind of Medicare should I get? I can give them that advice all day long, and I can charge for it, which I find a little odd, but that's sort of the state of the regulatory framework we live in. In any event, I hadn't focused on firms like yours that are advice only. And there's actually an advice only network that you guys are a part of, which after this live show ends, I will link to it. But of course, you guys, those listening, you can just Google advice only network. And it's a network of firms like Bill and Grady's that offer advice only. And I do get a lot of requests for that. People want a financial plan, or they just want to run some questions by someone. They don't want to pay a 1%, fee on assets. And it's sometimes challenging to find those folks. So I'm thrilled that you guys are part of that approach to financial planning. I kind of want to dive into what you do more specifically. I know you guys use Pralana as your primary tool. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell us why, and I know you have experience with Boldin, and you've mentioned others like Right Capital and eMoney and so on. But what do you like about Pralana? Why has that become sort of your retirement planning tool of choice?
Well, for me, they came on my radar way back in the Excel days because I was looking to build a financial plan. I had, some stuff in Quicken, which is kind of rudimentary, and I realize, like a lot of your audience, they're well informed, and they realize that if some tool is asking them a handful of questions and telling them when they can retire, that's not entirely trustworthy, right? There's this issue of fidelity, right? You need to have a high fidelity tool, because it's one thing managing your assets and having your portfolio of 3 to 4 index-based ETFs like Bogleheads do, but a financial plan involves all these moving pieces. So you need a high fidelity tool. In that space, my opinion is there's only a few that are considered high fidelity that are available to consumers. Boldin and Pralana being the 2 preeminent ones. Projection Lab, I guess, would be another. So I wanted something also that was highly secure. I'm big on this because I was an IT security guy in IBM, right? So I didn't want to be connecting all my accounts up and using Plaid to link to the accounts. For a long-term planning tool, you shouldn't need to do that, right? A lot of times that's just so that the facilitator can mine that data and sell it or whatever. And it presents a security risk. When Grady and I build plans for clients, we don't even put their last name in the plan. There's no account numbers. It's just Joe and Sally R. And we like that aspect of it. It's really secure that way. Another big one is that Pralana, their folks are very open to sharing the algorithms, right? This is really important. It's one thing to look at a pretty graph and see the good news that you can retire, but a lot of folks, especially the engineering types, they want to know the numbers behind that, and they're by that fidelity. But Pralana's folks will tell you how their algorithms work and give you input, and they're very open to making changes. They're not, kind of the big corporate type of entity that some of the others are. But again, they're all really good tools, and using any of them is a far better thing than not having a plan at all.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was, evaluating when I could retire, I used Boldin. So I knew about Boldin before I knew about Pralana. And also, I used Money Guide Pro when I was doing my courses. And so it's amazing just how the gap has been narrowed between these tools like Pralana and Boldin and some others versus the ones that you wouldn't think about purchasing 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how technology has really evolved to where a lot of people can use these tools and get a financial plan that's very helpful to what they're trying to achieve.
And
Yeah, I mean,
another big reason, Rob, is that there's a trap in a lot of these tools, especially since people are so focused on Roth conversions now, where, and I see it all the time, you have somebody that's doing this stuff or just using any Roth optimization tool, right? And they've got their Roth at 100% equities, right? Because it's tax-free gain. Why not? Let's have the 100% equities. And the Roth converter tool is seeing maybe they're doing tax location strategy where they've got all bonds in their pre-tax account, their IRA. Well, Roth conversion tools are going to see that as, red meat. Oh my goodness, look, they're only getting on this pre-tax account. It's all bonds. They're getting like, 3% yield. Whereas this Roth account at 100% equities is doing much better. Let's just put it all over there. And they get these blown out Roth conversion numbers. Pralana has found a solution to that.
And let me just stop you for a second, because we are going to come back to that. But I want to provide some context for folks. And even before I do that, for folks watching live, go ahead and ask all your questions in the chat. I see several of them specific to Pralana. I will get to them a little bit later in the show. I kind of want to just give a sort of more general questions first, and then I'll dive into your questions. But keep asking them in the chat. I do see them. I will get to them. But Bill, the reason I kind of want to take a step back, Roth conversions I want to talk about, including the very issue you raised. But let's just take a step back. So someone comes to you and wants help with a retirement plan. And let's imagine they're not using any software at the moment. So just at a high level, how does that work with your firm? Do you guys enter all the data for them in Pralana? Do they enter it? What's that relationship look like?
Well, we'll open a new plan for them in the kind of advisor dashboard that we have with Pralana. So we're using the tool to start creating their financial plan. They have an option. They can fill out some forms with the basic data that we need, which any financial planning tool needs, your account balances and so on and so forth. Or the second option is we'll give them a list of what's needed and we can do it in a meeting together. And this was Grady's brilliant idea, so that they're getting to learn the tool as we're entering the data. So we're not just going to take their money, take their information, and come back with a basic 2-inch thick financial plan to throw at them or a huge PDF. We're going to show them and enter the data together and talk about why the pieces are going in different places together. Once we have that after the first meeting, typically, we'll run some preliminary Monte Carlo and historical analyses. And most people are in better shape than they imagine. And that's an important thing because we want them to know that up front, because we don't want to button this thing up until we're really sure they've got everything that's on their wish list in there. And when they see they're at 100% success, we tell them, look, open your horizons now. You've got a lot of wiggle room here. Do you want to add that boat or that RV or retire earlier? Let's get that nailed down now before we finalize this. And we iterate maybe once more before we come up with a final product and cover it with them. And then we tell them in the final meeting, you have the option to purchase this tool and you can adopt all the work we've done away so it comes off our dashboard and it's visible to you. You can come back later and share it if you want us to do another review or help you with an annual update. But that's essentially at a high level how the process works.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll show folks the tool. So I'm going to take us off the screen for a moment. I mean, this is a demo version. I have my own personal account. What I want to jump to, you mentioned Roth conversions, but I think maybe the starting point is how you recommend, or when you're working with a client on a plan, how do you implement their investment portfolio? Because Pralana has what we're looking at now, what they call simple portfolio modeling, but they also have advanced portfolio modeling. And within that, they have something called mode 1 and mode 2, right? Yep. All of which eventually, when we get to it, is relevant to the question of Roth conversions. And so coming back to you guys, how do you model a portfolio in Pralana?
Want to take it, Grady?
Yeah, so for most of our clients, okay, we use the advanced portfolio modeling, and so the reason for that is that is a couple of reasons. First, you can put in the asset class name. You can have stocks, bonds, cash, and even if you have other types of investments, you can put something there. The other reason that we do that is because if you look at the rates of returns, you can have the rates of returns for your stocks and your bonds. You're able to do your one thing that you can't do in simple is that there's some things that you can't do with the Monte Carlo tool, where you can't put in your own standard deviations for other types of asset classes. So you can't really so people that have different accounts and they have they're really interested in their asset allocation. The advanced approach is the most appropriate. Now, most of the time we use mode 1 because if you
I'm
use
going to show this while you're talking.
okay. Yeah, so most of the time we use mode 1 because in mode 2, the tool will force it will force your allocations to match the allocation that you have in the main section, and that's probably not. I would say that's not what most investors are doing in reality. They're not, they may have they may have an allocation for an account, but it wouldn't be forced into an overall target. Now, if you're going to do that, just go ahead and just have your allocation split across the different, the different types of investment accounts. But yeah, we don't use the simple approach that much. It's most of the time it's the advanced for those reasons.
How much detail do you get into in terms of asset classes? Because with this advanced portfolio modeling, and I know I'm jumping around a bit, but you can obviously create, I don't know if there's a limit, but I could have small cap value, I could have REITs, I could have private equity, I could make a lot of different asset classes, each with then their own rates of return, and each with a taxation that could be different. Does it just depend on how complicated the client's portfolio is, or is there some other approach?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Because we do attract more of a DIY boglehead type of audience with our business model, it's almost always Vanguard target date type recipes, right? Of total index funds, total US, total international, and so forth. So it's pretty clean. But now, with everything going on, we're seeing more folks coming in that are into REITs and crypto and things like that. So Pralana out of the box has all the historical data for cash, stocks, and bonds. You can see that when you do a historical analysis, all the full tables going back to 1928. But if you're adding your own, as Grady alluded to, say you put crypto in there, right? You've got to put in an expected rate of return. If you want to do,
I'd like to hear what that is.
Oh yeah,
I would too.
Yeah,
in fact, let me get a pen and paper so I can write down your answer.
I'm not going there, Rob, because I tried to do it, and you look at some of the numbers from 2017 and then 2018 and 2022, and it's just insanity. The standard deviation is the real interesting part, but let's go with REITs because that has a pretty good long track record. And so we looked that up, and in the historical modeling, you would just have to either tie that new investment that they're doing to something that's already in Pralana, as far as the data going back to 1928, or build your own historical table, essentially, so that it could do that type of modeling for you. And that's, again, a big debate in the business of historical versus Monte Carlo. But to answer your question, it's mostly cut and dried with folks with just stocks, bonds, and cash, right?
Right. And this is the historical data you're referring to. I don't know if you can see it from your screen, but
yep.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess the mode 1 of the advanced approach gives you the flexibility that you need to accomplish all of this.
Yeah, it's mode one is better suited to folks that are keeping a consistent asset allocation across all their different types of accounts. They're 60-40 people, right? And for matters of simplicity, they're 60-40 in their taxable brokerage, their IRA, their Roth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, the hardcore folks will come back and say that's not tax efficient. You got to have all the bonds in your IRA and your stocks are going to be in your taxable brokerage, which is true. But, for the folks we're dealing with, which are typically just normal average working people, they're not sitting on, $10 million and up. And if we do the modeling of strategic asset location versus just having a nice clean asset allocation across all your different accounts, there's not really much difference, much tax advantage for them. So we say keep it simple so that if God forbid something happens to you, your spouse can easily understand this. As you get older, you're more likely to make mistakes and you have a cleaner situation to deal with here. And so that's why we like mode one. Mode two is better suited for folks that are doing that more advanced type of asset location strategy and don't want a Roth conversion algorithm to just go in and create mayhem for them.
Well, let's actually talk about Roth conversion. So if someone wants to do Roth conversion analysis, is it your view that mode one of the advanced portfolio modeling is probably the best approach?
It is, unless they consider themselves to be at an expert level, in which case, and they want to have the different asset allocations in different account types, then they would go to mode two, specify their desired overall asset allocation, say 60-40, and then a Pralana allows you to prioritize which accounts it's more important to hold that allocation so it can try to respect your wishes as it does the conversion and moves all that money around.
Yeah, let me make sure I understand this. So I've always understood this. You've got your overall target here. You've got your targets per account type here. Now, of course, depending on the numbers, Pralana might not be able to accommodate all of this exactly as you have it. So you can tell Pralana, well, I want to make sure certain accounts are exactly the way I want them. Here is a prioritization. So that in this case, the taxable account, it better be right. I want this one. That's my most important. I'm not saying it should be. This is just a hypothetical. And then we can go over here to see what that was. Well, it's just 60-40, the same as the overall target. But that's the basic idea. And as you get down to these, the accounts at the bottom, they may or may not match your target, depending on how much you have left in each of those asset classes.
That's correct. And by the way, those two bottom asset classes, HSA assets and 529, those are in there by default. They're kind of a hangover from the Excel version. They could be deleted. They really should be, when people are doing this, just FYI.
Yeah, I don't have them in my actual plan. So that's a good point. And so I guess this mode two, again, as you said, might be ideal. I guess it could be appropriate for anyone really focused on asset location.
Yes, very much.
But then that gets me to the question of the Roth analysis, which I'll go to it here, which it took me forever to figure this out, by the way. And then when I've been away from it for a couple of months, I come back to it and I still have to spend 45 minutes refreshing my memory on exactly how this works. But the issue that you raised, and I'll pull away from this for just a minute. Let me come back to you guys. Give me a second. I'm working two different computers, I got a mouse, a trackpad. There you are. Is that when you're doing a Roth conversion analysis, and to determine if a Roth conversion makes sense and how much and over how many years, the conversion, of course, is going to take money from one account, let's say a traditional IRA, and move it to a different account, a Roth IRA. And if the Roth IRA has a higher expected return, because let's say it's 100% stocks and your traditional IRA is 50-50 or whatever, that's going to influence the analysis. The software is going to say, we love Roth conversions because as soon as you put it in there, your returns go up.
Yeah.
And we really don't want the Roth conversion to do that. We want the analysis to be based just on taxes, at least I think.
Yeah, so, because people need to understand, that Roth at 100% with tax-free growth is great. But when you get to the point where any tool is optimizing your withdrawal strategy for tax purposes, and it's telling you, you're going to be tapping that Roth strategically over the next couple of years, if you've left it at 100% equity, now you have sequence risk, right? So it shouldn't be at 100% forever.
I wonder about that, because I think of sequence of returns risk as at a portfolio level, not an account level. And even if, but by the way, I say this, feel free to tell me you've got a different view. Even if the Roth is 100% stocks, and even if your plan is to take out of just the Roth for the first 10 years, right? Assuming it's not the only account that has stocks, you can always rebalance, right? You can take everything out of the Roth, but then go into your traditional and take some of your stocks and buy bonds, right?
Yep, you can. It's a matter also of selling shares when they're down. If there's a precipitous drop, those sort of psychological things sometimes factor in. But yeah, it's a moot, kind of a minor thing.
Or I guess in that case, it'd be selling bonds to buy stocks potentially. Okay. So how do you, if you can't have a different rate of return on the two accounts, because otherwise it's going to skew the Roth analysis, I guess in the context of Pralana, how do you go about making sure that I guess the expected rate of returns are the same, or that they just don't skew the Roth analysis?
Well, with mode 2, it starts with that you put in your desired overall asset allocation. So you say 60-40, right, is what you want to be at. And you got your Roth at 90-10 maybe, or something like that. Your taxable brokerage is higher in equities. And you set up that priority list, right? So as the converter is doing its work, it is taking that highest priority account and making sure that's set exactly where you want it to be. Maybe it's the Roth at 90% equity. So it's converting over from the IRA, taking money out, going to that account and filling it. We're talking Roth conversions. So this is IRAs then, strictly, not taxable brokerage accounts. And people may have several of them, right? So it's going to fill that bucket up and try to get it right. But as it gets to the lower priority account types, maybe you've already fulfilled your stock quota. So then those may not be your desired, asset allocation for that particular account. It may be swayed somewhat just to meet your overall goal of 60-40.
Yeah. But I wonder though, that's mode 2, right?
Yeah.
But the Roth conversion analysis, if you're using mode 2, let's go back to it because it'll be easier to show this, at least I think. So if we go to, and we'll go to we're in mode 2. So let's just imagine our overall allocation we want is 60-40. Do we have a Roth in here? But let's say for Roth, we want 100% stocks, right? And let's say we'll just use the inherit. Well, I don't want to use that. We'll use tax deferred. Let's say this is 50-50, right? And we can prioritize. We can go to priority. We could say, well, we want the Roth to be first and the tax deferred to be second. So those will likely, let's just assume that the system can honor these two allocations. That's still going to show a much higher expected return on the Roth. So I guess my question is, wouldn't that skew the Roth conversion analysis? Or when you're using mode 2, does Roth conversion analysis assume the overall allocation for the two accounts when it runs the analysis?
Yeah, it's looking at that overall target and trying to respect it, and also at the monies that are involved, right? So it knows your balances and in all these different accounts. And so it's trying to achieve the desired result the best it can by keeping that overall target in mind as its primary goal.
Well, what if you use mode 1, which I know you guys say you use a lot? Can that solve this issue with Roth conversion analysis, or does that creep back in?
If you're at mode 1 and your asset allocation is essentially the same across all of your accounts, it's going to work beautifully. Right?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, because if it's the same across all your accounts, then your expected return is going to be the same. See, this is where I and maybe I need to reach out to Stuart at Pralana. I just can't wrap my mind around how mode 2 solves this problem. In mode 1, you're right. If the asset allocation is the same, you've got a 60-40 portfolio across all your account types. it's not an issue. But if you don't, I can't figure out how mode 2 solves that problem.
It is
I
down
guess
in
the other thing I guess we need to also consider when we're talking about this is that, so Pralana is not a tax planning software.
Yeah.
It'll get you on the fairway, but it won't get you in the hole. And there's also a lot of other assumptions that are made that are going to influence, what makes sense from a conversion standpoint also, because a lot of the assumptions and recommendations are made based on a straight line assumption, which is not how the market is going to work in reality. So it's really more of a year by year, look at what makes sense from a Roth conversion standpoint.
Yeah,
and this is down in
I
the
get
weeds.
that.
So the
Although
best thing you can do,
if both accounts are invested the same way, they're both gonna encounter the same sequence, right?
the best thing you can do is Pralana has the most fantastic user manual of any modern day product. And
Yeah.
to solve this problem, because this is down in the weeds, right? It's hard to visualize. Stuart put in the manual two really good examples of this in action. And those really are what make it clear. So I would recommend folks go to that.
I was at a conference in September and I chatted with the folks at Boldin and at Projection Lab. I don't think the folks from Pralana were there. And now you guys were, well, I know, Grady, you said you were an engineer. Bill, you were at IBM. I was an English major. So this may be an idea that won't work. But I said to both of them, I said, why not have a Roth analysis that when it's run, it just assumes a rate of return for both accounts? And I suppose the user could pick it or not, but it just assumes 7% for both accounts, runs the analysis, or maybe it could assume the lower of the two expected returns from the two accounts, and runs the analysis that way so that the returns don't influence the outcome. And then you can incorporate the Roth conversion results into your plan, and of course carry on with whatever return assumptions you actually have. I guess it would matter in particular. I guess you would want to get the right rate of return for the traditional account, right? Because that's going to affect required minimum distributions down the road. It's not going to affect anything on the Roth, at least in terms of RMDs, right? But why not? It just seems like that might be a simplified way of doing this. I don't know.
You can do that in the tool. You can kind of simulate that. You want to create a new scenario or something and set it up as kind of a side case that you want to test.
Yeah. So how do you guys, stepping back away from Pralana for a moment, do you find that Roth conversions are an important tool that people use, or do you find that at the end of the day, for most people, it probably doesn't move the needle very much?
Really good question. Because we do that analysis for clients, right? And Pralana will show a graph of two lines: blue line, no Roth conversions; red line with their optimized solution. And people are pretty savvy right now these days about having their money spread around, especially FIRE audiences, right? They're building up that taxable brokerage, they're building up their Roth. And so they're just not like the old days where everybody just worked and had the 401k that was all their money sitting there. That was a potential tax bomb. So not as much. But the impetus around the Roth conversions now is mostly people that are doing it to protect themselves against future egregious tax hikes, given all the worry about our debt, to protect they or their spouses against one of the two passing away early and unexpectedly and leaving them in a single taxpayer bracket, Social Security survivor benefits, or to leave money behind tax-free for the heirs. So they're doing it for the non-mathematical reasons mostly. We're not seeing these, very few cases where it's like a make or break situation, or somebody has all their money in the 401k or IRA. So that's really important for folks to know. So we see people routinely now capping out their 24% bracket. They're not using any optimizer. They're pre-gaming their taxes in early December, finding out what their marginal bracket is and capping it up top of 22, top of 24 with Roth conversions.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad approach at all.
It isn't.
I think if you're 63 or older, you do need to think about IRMA at least a little bit. And I guess if you're on ACA and getting premium credits, you need to think about that. Both of which are cliffs in a way, right? I mean,
right.
Maybe sometimes the simpler approach is the better approach. Okay. Well, I know these are not easy questions, topics. I got
Well,
a couple more for you, and then I'm going to turn and look at the chat and ask and see what folks want to ask you from that are watching. Social Security. So I know Pralana has a Social Security analysis, and I can pull it up. But at a high level, how do you guys think through that and helping people figure out when they should start taking Social Security?
Grady, want to take it?
Yeah. So I guess if you know when you're going to die, and that it makes it very easy. But
Very easy.
um, but yeah, I think, and a lot of our clients are in a fortunate position to where for them they don't need the money to live off of in the first couple of years of their retirement. They could make it without it. And so in a lot of cases, it's kind of obvious that it would make sense, assuming you got a longer life, to take it longer. There are some cases where it's not intuitive. So what we see is that there's an age difference between the spouses, and someone is getting there and they can get their own Social Security. The conventional wisdom of both taking it at 70 always is not the right math answer. Sometimes it makes sense for the spouse to take it early to get their benefit and then migrate over into the
So
spousal benefit.
the
But
spouse with the spouse with the lower benefit taking early,
yeah,
and then the spouse with the higher benefit waiting until 70.
yeah, that's what we see. So it's some things that kind of happen on that are not obvious with the conversions. I'm sorry, not the conversion, the optimizer. Uh, but yeah, it's for a lot of people that doesn't really move the needle, and a lot of it depends on, are you correct on the assumption you're making on your life,
Well,
Yeah,
and yeah, who knows, right?
which
it's
which is
I'll let you know when I know.
right. So being wrong on that is going to offset any other kind of minor, 1 month here or there, which you assume.
Like Charlie Munger, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I won't go there.
Right.
one thing we do, Rob, is we sometimes we'll set it to 70 for both and take that kind of off the table. And while we're doing the other more important types of optimization, like the withdrawal strategy, Roth conversions, that sort of thing, and get those right. And then once we know those things, then we'll ask the Social Security Optimizer to do its job, because it's looking at that entire context,
Yeah.
which is why this Social Security Optimizer is better than using a standalone like OpenSocialSecurity.org or Maximize My Social Security. And so in doing that, we can make sure that taking it early is not interfering with a more important need to do the Roth conversions, right? Because you're bumping up that tax bracket.
Well, it's interesting to me because to me, Open Social Security, which I think is a phenomenal tool, solves a slightly different question. If you use a tool like Pralana or Boldin or Maxify, and I'm going to have Larry, who's the professor behind Maxify, on the show here in a few weeks. You're putting in a life expectancy, and for a lot of folks, their thought is longevity insurance, and I think that's a very reasonable approach to Social Security. But some folks might say, I don't really need it for longevity insurance. I'm fine. I could live to be 130. I'm fine. And so really, if I want to maximize my benefits, it's probably some sort of actuarial analysis that makes the most sense, because I can put in Pralana that I'm going to live to be 97, but I probably ain't going to live to be 97.
Right.
And to me, that's the question that Open Social Security solves really well. That tools like Pralana and Maxify, I don't think, maybe Larry, when he's on the show, will correct me, but I don't think they're really designed to solve it that way. So I guess it just depends on the circumstances, at least in my mind. I brought up the Social Security analysis a minute ago, but in my demo, I've got someone who's single, so it's not nearly as much fun as trying to solve for a married couple. I was talking to a friend about their retirement plan, and they wanted to retire at 67 and start Social Security then. And we were looking at all the numbers and how should they invest and all of this. But when it came down to it, I said, look, if you want more confidence, work a little longer, because if you can, even 1 year, if you delay Social Security for 1 year, that's 8%. It's another year you're not drawing on your savings. It's another year you're actually saving towards retirement. And by the way, it's another year in this person's case where you're not on Medicare yet, or you're only on it as a supplement. So, because the thing is good as, say, original Medicare is, and Medicare Advantage can be good too, but it's not cheap. And I wonder if you have those kind of conversations with your clients about the incredible, I mean, you may not want to work longer, I get that, but financially speaking, every year you keep working makes a huge difference in financially.
Yeah. We get those discussions all the time. And also the other thing is that's one less year that you need the money to work because you're retiring, that's on your life expectancy. So a lot of times,
1 year closer to death.
Right, exactly. So morbid, but yeah, that's the truth as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we've seen it where that one extra year of working changes, it changes it quite a bit as far as the robustness of the plan.
And one
Well,
thing
I
we
guess
do,
for-
Rob, is that I keep going back to the emotional aspects of this, right? And if we get a client that's coming in and their plan is at like 75%, we want to hit that magical 90%, right? They can be disappointed, and it can be really hard to tell them, well, work another year and we'll get this thing to 90. And because it's just hard for them to go into work every day. So what we tell them is, look, implement that fire mindset. Even if you're 65, you monetize your passions. We start having those conversations. What do you like doing? I had a nurse that just couldn't take, this was right after COVID. She was totally burned out. And I asked her what she liked doing. And she said to calm herself down after her shift, she likes to go in her garage and refinish furniture. And so I said, quit the nursing and start getting that furniture out on the market.
That's a great idea.
I checked in with her a year later. She was making $60K refinishing furniture. She had quit her job like that week. And so, most people, if they have that little bit of supplemental income, if we're at 75%, we plug in a part-time job or something like that, it gets them over the wire, close enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's great. That's a great
and
story.
also those percentages are based on, you would normally run off the cliff if you got into one of those sequences, which most people aren't doing. They're going to cut back on their expenses. So it's almost like it's a probability that you need to make some type of an adjustment or something.
Yeah, my mom, I don't know that she needed to financially, but she was a teacher. And after she retired, she continued to substitute teach for a decade. And she could work whenever she wanted to, didn't have to work, and enjoyed doing it. Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, let me ask, I'm going to put some questions on the screen. I'll read them. I'm not sure if you guys will be able to see them or not. Maybe.
Yeah, you can see them.
Greg, okay. Pralana user since 2018. Does Bill have insight into when the iterative tax calc feature, and by the way, I have absolutely no idea what that is, will be solved? We're looking forward to it in the online version, Sigh.
Yeah. So this, in a nutshell, what this is when you are selling assets in Pralana, maybe it's telling you need to take a withdrawal from your taxable brokerage to pay your expenses for a given year, right? So it's saying take the $100,000 out of your taxable brokerage, and it's looking at the asset taxation as you showed earlier and knowing there's going to be a tax bill there. Apparently in the algorithm, there's something that causes an iterative infinite loop with this type of math. It's not a Pralana thing, it's a math thing. And so what Pralana would do was put that tax bill onto the following year, right? Which, I mean, most people pay their taxes the following April anyway, so it's not the end of the world, but people want to see year by year, what are my expenses? This is my tax bill. Yeah, I'm going to pay it in April, but I want to know what my taxes were for this year. So that's the problem. It's been a problem going back to Excel, and from what I understand from the Pralana folks, it's close. It's their top priority because it's been asked for a lot, so we're close from what I understand.
Well, Boldin, unless they've changed it, Boldin does it the same way.
Same.
I don't know. I don't know how other software. I just haven't looked into it much beyond that. But okay.
And there's another important thing with all the tools, Rob, and that's that, and we reinforce this to clients a lot. When they see that success number, right, 90% success or whatever, it's important for folks to realize that, why wouldn't you want to be at 100? Well, because these tools, for the most part, are assuming that in those corner cases where you're most close to failure, which is bad economies the rest of the way out, essentially, that you're going to keep your spending level and not cut back. Where it's human nature that if we're in a recession 5 years in a row, most people are going to maybe take one less vacation, eat out one less day a week, and that more than covers that small 1% chance of failure. So that's how we try to describe to people when they say, why do I want to be 100% instead of 90%? I think Boldin has something in there that asks you how you would cut back your spending in bad economies, from what I remember.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I try to tell people is that, this is these are all long range retirement planning tools. They're not tax software to calculate your taxes. And it's okay for it to be close. It's not going to be exact. Now, some issues can throw off the results maybe more than others. So you have to be at least sensitive to that. But I get a lot of emails from folks really worried about some very sort of obscure aspect of one of the programs that's probably not affecting the results much. Now, in this case, I get the idea of wanting to see the taxes in the same year, although I don't know. It's not been something I've really focused on much, but I know that it does.
Well,
it does drive some folks crazy.
Yeah. And one of the new things about Pralana Online is it'll generate your projected tax returns, right? So I tell our clients, make sure you generate that projected 2025 return. And then when you go to file in April, hold them side by side. Of course, they're not going to be the same because Pralana's working off projections where the other one's got exact data. But it's a good check to see if something is egregiously wrong, maybe in your planning inputs that you may have missed. Your asset taxation could be incorrect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, here's another question. I'm not sure if I agree with the premise to this one, but it says many of these tools assume that your money is in a retirement account and is in funds. What if it's not? I guess two things. I don't know that it assumes a retirement account, right? Because you have a taxable account as an option.
Right.
I'm not sure. It seems to me that Pralana and Boldin, for that matter, too, are somewhat agnostic when it doesn't really matter to the software. In fact, it doesn't even know if it's in a fund or not. Right? Or am I missing something?
No, it doesn't. You got to tell it what your rate of return is going to be on that account. And as long as you get that right, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, that was one of the criticisms of Boldin, was that you couldn't input your asset allocation. And I think they may be working on something to change that, but I've always wondered, who cares? I mean, maybe with advanced even then, I mean, what matters is the assumed rate of return. Whether you call it a stock, a bond, or some mix, I don't know. I don't know that it matters. Maybe it doesn't.
I think it can matter. If you're, I think from a standard, I think if you look at the volatility of different portfolios and making the comparison of, okay, how does a 80-20 look versus a 60-40 as far as that, I think it could matter by having it in different asset allocations.
Yeah. And I know with Projection Lab, you can set your own standard deviation. I don't think you can do that. You can't do that in a Boldin. I don't know. Can you set your own standard deviation in Pralana?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can override so there's the default standard deviation, but you can override that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, some people that would be very important. For other people, I'd probably say you maybe myself included, you probably shouldn't mess with it. But I'm dropping your website into the chat just so people know how to contact you. If I can do this. So I'm looking at my teleprompter, which I almost never use, but the screen is about this big. I'm used to a big monitor. So it's like I'm squinting. What's going on? It's like I'm showing my age. Okay. I think that worked. All right. Let's see what else we have. I have a very large AMT credit. Do you know any of the tools workarounds that can incorporate this into Roth conversion modeling? It reduces the effective tax rate. I don't.
I don't either.
I'm not aware if they can handle that.
Yeah. Okay.
Although I'd say that when we get into some esoteric types of problems, corner case type stuff, we go to the Pralana forum. Their forum tends to be full of engineer types that just have maybe retired, but just can't get enough engineering. And that's where it comes into play about some of the demanding to know what's in the algorithms in that. And some of those folks have found really creative solutions to problems like that. So I'd go looking in those places to see if someone.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. They said, this is from Gary, their projected RMDs that are well beyond living expenses, a good enough reason to do annual Roth conversions. Gary is 55. So his projected RMDs are going to exceed what he's going to need. Does that indicate he should do a Roth conversion? Almost like a trick question. I want multiple choice answers before I answer this question.
Grady gets all the trick questions. That's the rule.
It's going to depend. So we need to know a lot about that, right? So, if you're in a, 37% tax bracket now and you're pulling more than you spend, but you're in a 10% later, then, you're going to get a different answer versus that. So I think that's not enough information for us to know.
Yeah, that was my initial thought. It's still a tax question.
Yeah.
The fact that you're not spending all the RMD doesn't answer the question, what are your taxes now and what would
it's
they
about
be
your
then?
tax rate, not that it's coming out of the account, when you're older.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions that I can't show on the screen just because they're on a different system, but I want to cover them before. How long has it been? Almost an hour. Okay. So this person his name is Jeff. He bought your book, Plan Your Money Path. He's working with Pralana. He says, my wife and I are both retired several years from starting Social Security at 70. So I guess they're both waiting to start Social Security at 70. My question is regarding self-funded long-term care, in this case, memory care, but long-term care, and how that factors into Roth conversion analysis. So when you guys are doing Roth conversion analysis, do you consider the possibility that your clients will need to spend a lot of money later in life for long-term care?
Yeah, because you don't want to convert all that money away and pay the taxes on it when you can leave it in the IRA and get a big tax break later on for long-term care, charitable giving, that sort of thing, right? So what do you think, Grady? I mean, that's kind of what we usually look to
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. I think that's one of the sometimes that can be some of the non-math answers also, because if you can use that money, tax-free, charitable contributions is another area where if you're charitable inclined anyway, and there's a lot of benefits for not converting, a portion of your money to spend money on that, and you get the same benefit.
QCDs, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, for charity, I guess for medical expenses, generally, you can deduct anything that medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of AGI. Is that the rule, I think? And so the idea is if, later in life, you spend a lot of money on healthcare because of, long-term care needs, much of that will be tax deductible. But if you've moved all your money to a Roth, tax deduction doesn't do you any good anymore.
Exactly.
So the theory is keep a little money left, or not a little, I don't know, some amount in your traditional IRA. Of course, I suppose you could end up not needing it because at 89, you get hit by a truck, which is, by the way, how I kill myself off on the show all the time. I get hit by a truck. So if I got hit by a truck at 89 and I've got, I don't know, whatever, 100 grand in a traditional IRA, well, if my wife's still alive, it's hers. But if not, then I guess our kids pay the tax bill, and I don't really care at that point. How do you think about amount in long-term care generally, and how do you pay for it?
Well, we have some resources that we send the clients to. The KFF site is one of them that have pretty good calculators. A lot of the calculators out there are not very good. So we've used a lot of them, and we've found one or two that we like them to explore, because it's not as simple as it was before, right? And the good thing is people have options now. So you can go in and tell it what zip code you expect to be in when you're receiving this care. A lot of people have planning to move south, for example. They may live up north now, but that makes a difference in terms of the cost of care. And you can tell it what type of care that you are preferable to, whether it's somebody coming into the home or going into, more assisted living or full-time nursing home, that sort of thing. And it will game out those costs for you. And that's important to do. And we also tell people to be active in this while they're still younger and go around to some of these facilities, get the free lunch, the free dinner, do the tour. A big thing we see with our clients now that they tend to like and have had put their parents through are these graduated stages of living facilities where you can buy in when you're kind of a young, maybe in your 70s type of person, and they have pickleball and things like that. And then as you get to later stages of life where you're more immobile, you get the additional care that you need, and it's all factored into the plan. And for people that have long-term care insurance, it becomes more complicated because there's always these delay periods. We had a client whose mom passed during the delay period, and she got no help whatsoever despite paying those egregious premiums for quite a long time. So if you go to the facilities, get the free lunch, the free dinner, whatever it is, take the tour, they'll sit down with you and analyze your coverage and tell you where there might be gaps and what your actual expense might be. So it's good to game it out now when you're young and plug those numbers into the tool because it is extremely variable.
Yeah, KFF is Kaiser Family Foundation. Excellent resource on all things healthcare related. I dropped the link to the homepage. I think they have a number of different calculators on their site. And do you, and I know, Bill, you and I were chatting about this for a few minutes before we went live today, but do you help your clients figure out whether to get original Medicare or Medicare Advantage as part of your work?
Yeah, really good question. And as I mentioned, your Medicare series is fantastic. I recommend folks dive right into that because it is really complicated, and the decisions are important because you can get locked into your choice, and it can be very expensive to try to change it later, where you have to have underwriting occur. This is a very specialized area, and we're not comfortable making that choice for clients or giving them recommendations. But what I do is I defer them to somebody that is a broker that I trust. She's a pharmacist, extremely ethical, that I know are going to give these folks the best advice possible for them and not based on, where she's commissioned and that sort of thing. And that's worked out pretty well. There's just some things that I think, kind of more specialized and it depends on what drugs they're taking and what their health is and that sort of thing.
Yeah, one thing that surprised me, in fact, I plan a video, I might publish it tomorrow, about the cost of Medicare, is that particularly if you're working, you have a job, you've got good health care and your employer pays for a lot of it and you're paying just a little bit. And then you retire and let's say at 65 and get original Medicare with a Medigap policy, you're paying a lot more money. Your premiums just went up, sometimes by several fold, depending on how good your employer benefits were. And I think that can be a shock to a lot of people. You kind of think Medicare's got to be inexpensive, it's a government program, you've paid into it all these years, but then, you're paying $185 for Part B, and I think it's going to be, I don't know if they announced 2026 Part B. It was going to go to like 206. Let's see if they've announced it. 206.50. It's projected. And then, you could easily, depending on what kind of Medigap plan you get, could be paying a couple $100, and that can go up, of course, go up over time. And then you got prescription drugs that you've got to buy. Even with an insurance plan, you could be paying a lot of money depending on the drugs you're on. And so when I talk to people about the retirement budget, and they say, well, this is what I'm spending, I always ask them, what have you factored in for Medicare? Because if you're just assuming it's, the same cost you're spending now through your employer, you could be in for an unpleasant surprise. Now, of course, there's Medicare Advantage, cheaper premiums, but a lot more out of pocket, so it kind of just depends. But all right. Another question for you guys. If someone's just getting started with Pralana, the question was, do they have a quick start method that folks can use? And I know they do have something they call Quick Start, but I know, Bill, in your book, you don't recommend using it. And I'll show people what it looks like if I can maneuver here. But Is that right? This is the quick start right here. Build, quick start. You kind of recommend that people skip this, right, and just go right to family.
Well, that might have been my engineering mindset, peeking through a little bit too aggressively there. It's fine to use this. If you want to jump in and you're excited and want to get a quick number, go ahead. But by no means assume that this is your final answer, right? Use it to build and really create a high fidelity plan. And it will fill in a bunch of the stuff for you. So, well, you just have to, kind of after you do this, make sure you have the diligence to go through the other pages, because there's some important stuff there that we don't want you to overlook. But it's okay to get started with this. And by the way, they've improved it quite a bit since I made those remarks. The tool itself has put in a lot of different features and enhancements over the year, which is why Grady and I are kind of working on a second edition of the book to follow on to that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, just talking with you guys, meeting you, Pralana is something I dove into a while ago and did a few videos on, but then kind of stopped using it, in part because of its complexity. And I just like Boldin and Projection Lab, but I like Pralana too. It certainly can model things that Boldin and Projection Lab cannot. Now, I think probably for a lot of people, they might not need that extra, what do you call it, that high fidelity. Yep. It's like me with music. I think it sounds just fine coming out of the Alexa microphone, speaker. What I don't need fancy. But in any event, this is kind of motivating me to dive back into it, which leads me to the last question that at least I have for you guys today. This came from a viewer, and I'll just summarize it. But basically, they ask, have you guys given any thought to developing an online training program? You've got your book, but have you thought about doing some sort of online training program for Pralana?
Yeah, I mean, we have some classes available on the site, and in line with our kind of mission to educate people. The Pralana one is more or less, we're going to spend hour and a half with the folks, taking them through and showing them the tool with a sample scenario and not the real live data. That's a whole other offering, and showing them how to get in there and get started. And and it's important to note that it's not so much getting the numbers in there. This was incredibly important, right? To put the right numbers in the right places, but interpreting the results. We see a lot of folks that know where the numbers go, but when they get those final results back, they can misinterpret those and still make bad decisions. So, but yeah, it's a good idea. What we need is time, I guess. Would like to do something like that.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that myself, of course, for Boldin, Projection Lab, and Pralana. And I haven't ruled it out, but it's incredibly in my mind anyway, it's incredibly time consuming to do it right. And you'd kind of have to commit to constantly updating it. Because
as soon as you get it done, it's out of date. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's new features, something's changing. Yeah. And again, so I haven't ruled it out, but who knows? All right, I got one more question, and then I appreciate your time. I know we've been at it more than an hour, but let me throw this one up there if I can read it. There was a chapter in Bill's book about Vanguard balanced funds asset location. How would he model that in Pralana to estimate the quote cost of non-ideal asset location, i.e. a balanced fund in a brokerage account?
Great question. And that's one of the advantages of Pralana, allowing you to input your asset allocation, right? So Pralana allows you to create up to 3 different scenarios. Create your baseline scenario, maybe with your balanced fund stuff, 70-30, what you have there, 70% equities, 30%, which is in the normal Vanguard balanced fund, right? Then copy that scenario once it's got all your important information in there to a second one, and then go in and simply change it. So now you're using strategic tax efficient asset location. You're making your IRA accounts all 100% bonds, 0 stocks, and your taxable brokerage 100% stocks and 0 bonds, that sort of thing. Run the Monte Carlo on both, and then Pralana lets you compare the metrics from 2 scenarios side by side, and you can see what the deltas are in terms of your trajectory of wealth over the course of your life and your final ending balance and those sorts of things. And that's how you can tell how big of a deal it is for you particularly. For some people, it may be. For others, it may not be worth the extra work involved in the risk that you'll screw it up as you get older, or your spouse is going to be left to deal with it if you pass.
Here's a twist on that occurred to me, is that if you have what some would call a tax inefficient portfolio in your taxable account because you've got a balanced fund, for example, and you're paying a lot of ordinary income on bond interest. Maybe there's some REITs in there. It'll make your Roth conversions look better if you're paying the tax out of the taxable account, because you'll be moving those inefficient investments into a Roth, which is actually part of Vanguard's Better calculator tool. I don't know if you've seen that, but one of the things they ask is whether your brokerage account is inefficient or not from a tax perspective. The more inefficient it is, the better the Roth conversions look. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being willing to have me grill you with questions for an hour or more. And I will link to your book below the video, and I'll add your website to the video. I take it you guys are still taking new clients?
Yep. We're a boutique outfit, so we like to manage it that way. We like to turn things around for folks when they're motivated, rather than put them on a wait list that's months long. We never like that when we're using other people's services, so we try to turn things around quickly.
Good. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on to the show, and let's stay in touch. I'd like to stay in touch, particularly as I have Pralana questions. I can send them to you.
Let me know when you want to team up on that instructional video, Rob, since you've got all the video expertise, which we do not have.
Well, I just got to find the time, because you mentioned the user manual. It is a great user manual. I think it's 37,000 pages long, plus or minus. I mean, it's massive. Maybe it's not 37,000 pages, but it's long. It's hundreds of pages for sure. Yeah. So it would take a lot of work. All right, guys. Well, appreciate it. To everyone else, thanks for watching. Hopefully you found this useful and helpful. And I end the show the same way every single time, and that is, remember, until next time, the best